Thanks very much for coming along and staying even though the weather's deteriorating outside. The purpose of tonight is to tell you about an individualised parental support programme that we've been running over the last 18 months as a pilot project. Myself, Nuno and Sean have been working with parents. We've worked with 8 different parents in the club on how they can better support their kids, basically, in sport. So it's been a 3 to 4 month period, roughly, that we've worked with them. 1 session every 2 or 3 weeks, and then we've given them some exercises and things to do between that. And it's gone really well. So the idea of tonight is to kind of tell you a bit more about it and to formally offer it for the whole club. And also just to talk a bit more about working with parents, about why we think it's really important to work with parents, all the challenges that you face as parents, talk a bit more about that. Thanks very much. And also talk about all the different ways that you as parents influence your kids in sport. So there's quite a few things we're going to run through. If you do have any questions as I'm going, feel free to fire them out, or at the end we'll have plenty of time for questions as well. So, why work with parents in sport? What we found is that there's no way that children can do really, really well in sport without parents behind them. So it's very, very rare for professionals to make it in sport unless their parents have been an amazing emotional support for them. They've put the time in travelling around and everything like that. So parents, massively important for kids' success in sport. But at the same time, what a lot of the research shows is that parents can often hold back kids in their sport as well and sometimes get in the way. So there's kind of a double-edged sword with this kind of work, that on the one side it's so important for parents to do that, kids don't have much chance without it, but then on the other side sometimes they can kind of be holding their child back without really realising or putting pressure on. So the other thing that we believe is that children have coaches and have parents looking after them. Us as coaches, we have mentoring, we have ongoing training, but for you guys there's no one there for you really. So there's all kinds of challenges that you face when you're, the financial side of things, the time commitment, the having to seeing your kids competing, losing, things not going well. There's very little support for you, and that's something that we want to, do something about. The other thing that we've kind of found is that it's just sometimes a very small change in the parent in terms of how they understand the sport or how they talk to their child can make a massive difference for the child. So about 10 years ago, when I was at Loughborough, I coached a boy who was 10 years old. Very talented player, great on court and in practice, worked very hard. As soon as we would get onto a match court, it would fall to pieces. There was tears all the time. I went to tournaments with him and his mum. We had tears. His game would just fall to pieces, and it was a tough situation. Over time, we kind of sat down. Ryan, his name was, and his mum and myself, and we just kind of talked through what was happening and talked through about what expectations I had for Ryan and what his goals were. And what started to happen was that his mum could start to see really what his targets were. So it was like, right, I want Ryan to go for his cross-court shots and get a lot of those in. And if he does start to lose, to stay calm and still focus on his game plan. And what happened with the child is that when he saw that his mum was really interested in that, and that if he could do those things, she would be pleased with him, something just clicked, like a light bulb went off in his head, and he just went on, happy smiley, and performed amazingly. I mean, no tears, and did really, really well. And I was shocked, because that was the first time I'd seen something like that. I do all this work with kids on court, and it was just from a few conversations that it had just completely changed the way that he was thinking about sport and about his tennis. And now he felt he could kind of get his mum's approval, and it really changed. Not only for the child, but also for the mum. Now the mum kind of got what the challenges were for him more as he was playing, and could actually feel quite proud and say, oh yeah, look what he's done that there, hasn't he? Even though he's losing, he's managed to stay calm. And so it was this thing we've put at the bottom about a win-win opportunity. Not only can it really help the child, but also it can make the journey for you as a parent a lot more enjoyable, and it gives you a chance to feel more proud really of your children, when you can see really what the struggle is and what they're dealing with. Have I just done two? Yeah. Okay, so we'll talk a bit now about how parents influence their children in sport. So poor behaviour and emotional control, the way parents set boundaries with kids and the reward systems that they set up, and if they're able to work with the coaches so that there's a consistent approach to that, that can make a massive impact on, you know, racket smashing and tantrums on the court. Confidence, again, parents, especially for younger kids, the way parents speak to their kids, the way they support them in matches, all the conversations, their actions, have a big impact on the children's confidence. You know, if the parent's really negative the whole time, often the child will be coming off and thinking, I'm not good enough, I'm never able to kind of meet my parents' expectations. They're not thinking that, obviously, consciously, but that's what's happening. And you see it quite a lot, that when parents are really negative the whole time, that the child doesn't think very much of themselves and there's a drop in confidence. But at the same time, if parents are just always, yeah, that was great, really good, excellent, every single time they play, then there's no discernment really in terms of what's going on, and again, that doesn't lead to confidence. So it's quite a complex process between parent and child on this, but what's clear is parents definitely do impact the confidence of kids. Motivation, this is a really important one, especially in this country, because a lot of children at a younger age are really just playing for their parents, and by the time they get to 13, 14, there's a massive dropout rate. So again, the way that you talk to your child, if you're able to empower them, to involve them in the decisions around their tennis, to help them to see why they want to play for themselves, and you know, involve them in that whole process, that can mean that by the time they're 13 or 14, they're playing for themselves. And that way they're going to go all the way. Because there's no chance, especially in tennis, unless your child is really committed to it for themselves, there's no way they're going to put the hours in, and as they get older do all the travel and so on. So that's another big area. Putting pressure. You've all probably seen some parents at tournaments who are shouting at kids when they're playing, and they come off and they get an absolute grilling. Obviously that's an obvious way where the child might be feeling a lot of pressure, but it can also happen at a much more subtle level. So often parents are completely unknowingly, just with little actions or things that they say, actually putting a bit of pressure on the kids. And in their little minds, they get all kinds of things going on in their minds which think, yeah, my mum expects this or dad expects that. And it's very easy for that to be happening. Mental toughness. For me, mental toughness comes from having confidence, being motivated, not feeling too much pressure, and that's kind of lays the foundation for your children to be mentally tough, to be able to play well on big points, because they're confident in themselves and because they're not too worried on the court. The way children deal with losses, again, parents can impact that massively. Obviously all kids don't like losing, but the difference between coming off and being disappointed but learning from that loss and thinking, you know, having that discussion, right, what was it that made them win today? It's like, oh yeah, my backhand cross court just wasn't consistent enough. So I'm going to train that all week extra hard, and then next time I play them, they better watch out. So that's kind of a positive approach to losing. The other one is just, you know, if parents are saying, if you win this match, I'm going to buy you McDonald's or whatever. If it's all just about winning and losing and nothing else, if it's winning at all costs, that can get children cheating in matches, and then when they do lose, they're not able to deal with it very well. You know, then it's going to be probably the next few days, their head's going to be down, they're thinking they're no good, they're not going to train very well. All of these things kind of lead to the overall quality of experience for the children in sport. So I see a lot of kids getting amazing things from sport, great friendships, developing life skills, good self-esteem because, you know, they're achieving things, they're taking ownership of what they're doing. So there's that, and then I see other kids who are unhappy in the sport, who are under pressure, who don't believe in themselves, who end up giving up, who don't get on with others. And parents can help to improve that experience for the kids so that it can be a really positive one. So, we'll talk more now about the challenges that you guys face on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. Obviously the stresses of watching. I'm sure you can relate to some strong emotions as you're watching. You know, kids are out there by themselves in the gladiatorial sport. They've got to often make their own line calls, deal with cheating, all kinds of things going on. I mean, that is, you know, it's bad enough for me as a coach. I can't imagine what it must be like for you guys when it's your child out there. Another issue is how hard to push them. Because on one side, I'm sure you're very aware of not overly pushing them and wanting it to come from them. But then the opposite of that is if your child's got talent and they really enjoy it, then they need your kind of leadership and guidance. So that's a tricky balance. Other difficulty for parents, you give up your weekend, you travel halfway across the country, your child loses each match, you get the silent treatment all the way home. I can imagine that's not too much fun. You've got the tricky terrain of relationships with coaches, with other parents. You often see parents arguing together, you know, scenes at tournaments. You've got LTA officials. If there's worries about the coach, that maybe you don't think things are working well, a lot of coaches, their attitude is parents just get in the way of what they want to do with the child, so that can be tricky. Dealing with bad behaviour. Again, I'm sure a lot of you have been tearing your hair out when you hear massive screams, rackets being thrown, all the tantrums and tears. And then there's the whole planning side of things, especially in tennis. It's such a commitment with tournaments, training, match play. It's kind of ongoing.
Okay, so this is the bit where I come in, and I'm going to speak more from my academic side and my academic experience and my research side. My experience that has grown from my master's and my PhD essentially, where I looked into a lot of these factors. I mean, I looked into overtraining and burnout, but there's a lot that I found in my research that has to do with parents, and I'm going to focus on that more and show you how that also impacts or can impact on overtraining and burnout development. What I will expose here, and I want you to be aware of, is that it's just mainly the interesting fact that how John's all that he's spoken so far, and he's coming from a purely field experience, okay, and I'm coming from a lab, university academic experience, and how that parallels. Okay, so what the research that has been done in parental influence on sports pretty much parallels what John has said so far. So what we found is that for the last 20 to 30 years, there's a huge amount of studies that have focused on parental influence, parental factors, and how they can influence the child development through sports. And essentially, there's the main message that has come out from that is that parents can influence, okay, either positively or negatively, all right? And they can either influence the child experience of being a healthy experience through sport and indirectly influence performance, or they can have a more detrimental effect on the child's experience through sport and also through that indirectly influence performance, which is always the ultimate motivation and outcome that anyone's looking at, you know, be it a parent or coach or a researcher or the athlete himself. To give you an example, the first survey that came out 15 years ago, roughly, done on a cohort of 100 athletes and 45 parents, tennis parents, okay, so it was in tennis-related sports in the United States. They found out that 29% of the youth tennis players had experienced feelings of embarrassment during tournaments, and these experiences were expressed by 61% saying that their parents had walked away from courts, 30% saying that they had screamed and yelled at that child, and even worse than that, you know, a 13%, considerable, significant 13% had physically abused them to a certain level. Now, again, why work with parents? This study from Harvard, he's a leading world psychologist, sports psychologist. He works for the LTA from Loughborough University. And this study, conducted in 2010, was another survey, and they found that the main factors that parents could influence were just what John was saying. Again, how the child behaves and grows through sports, how they can make decisions,